Well, my name is Sarah, artist name Ashibah. I am half Egyptian, half Danish. I've lived most of my life in Egypt. I have been singing ever since I could remember. I wrote my first song at the age of 7 years old. And I've been entertaining my family since I was a kid. So it was very obvious at a very young age that I was meant to entertain. I started I started working with music as soon as I possibly could. I started singing, and DJing and music production came a little bit later in school. It was I was very curious about how music came to be music the way it was, and production and vinyls and everything. But it started really happening when I moved to Denmark at the age of 18, where I started working with a producer, learning all how the entire setup of a studio works, how to work with my vocals, how to produce my vocals, and just how writing, everything came there. And I created the name Ashibah, which is my last name is Habashi. And when I moved the letters around, it became Ashibah. So it's an anagram of my last name. That's where the touch of the Arabic side comes from. And the rest is pretty much history. I had the pleasure of creating a track with Colombo in 2013. And after that, creating a track with Lucas, Vintage Culture, which started my whole love affair with beautiful Brazil. And I got to go on a tour to Brazil, and I fell in love with that place. And I just felt like I never wanted to leave. So I tried everything I could to go back. Yes, I think that I fell in love with the Brazilian people, the country, and I think it reminded me a lot of Egypt because I lived in Egypt when I was a kid, and Egyptians have the same life, I think the same life zest as Brazilians do. So I think that it reminded me a lot of home. And so I think that was one of the reasons I really, really fell in love with it. And plus the entire country, as soon as you land there, the entire country has rhythm. So you just wanna stay. Well, I consider myself this a citizen of the world, if that makes any sense, because I've lived so many different places. I've lived in Egypt, I've lived in Denmark, I've lived in America, where I played basketball, and I've lived in Brazil. So I consider myself a little bit of a citizen of the world. So I kind of go where my heart tells me to go. That's pretty much what happens. I think the first initial reaction was shock, which I think a lot of people felt because it was such an unknown territory for everyone. We didn't really know what to expect. In the beginning, we were like, okay, lockdown and everything. And as the time progressed, I felt that because it kept becoming unknown and because there's so much that we don't know about this disease, it's turned into shock, turned into fear. And then now fear, because it's gone on so long, fear has turned into, oh, come on, for the fuck's sake, let's get this over with kind of thing. When this pandemic started, yeah, I was in the south of Brazil where I was living in Balneário Camboriú. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I've lived there for 3 years and I still don't know how to pronounce the city. But Balneário Camboriú, which I love, and I think in the beginning when it happened, we went from like everything was okay to everything was just different, kind of, and that was kind of a shock. That actually first hit me in June, because I felt that in the beginning it was quite people were having a hard time believing the capacity of how grand it was, and I think the media wasn't informing us enough about what actually was happening. And when I started seeing a lot of countries around the world locked down, and you saw the situation in Italy and everything, I think that's when fear really hit me. And we were like, okay, we're gonna wait it out. Just, make a lot of music, wait it out, just hang out, and then see what happened. And then in June, I think that's when I decided, okay, we need to go back to Denmark to just reboot and figure out what we're gonna do from here. So Well, I think that the funny thing about the creative process is that it has its ups and downs. You can't really turn on creativity always, so it also always depends on kind of on what mood you're in and if you're inspired and everything. So I would say that I've had I've had a lot of time. I've had a lot of time to reflect on myself and on the situation and everything since the pandemic started. So I've written a lot of songs, which is amazing, but not all the productions that I've made are completely on point. But I've gotten um, to have a lot of trials and errors. So I think that it affects you. Of course, it affects you. Some days that you're positive, and some days that it's a little bit harder. But I think if you can, you should try to channel that into being as productive as possible. Even if you don't end up creating something that you're completely happy with, at least you created something and then you've kind of dealt with those emotions or reflected how you felt through your music. So I've had some great days and I've had some not so good days. So well, I think that well, I thought they were very beautiful because they were saying so much without words, and that's one of the things I think that we can all understand. That you can see in the videos the frustration and the kind of the unknowing where we don't, and I think that's something that scares us as humans, or at least it scares me. It's not knowing what's happening, not knowing when you can go outside, or not knowing when you can see your family again, and all these things. And I think that's one of the things that scares us a lot. So um, that was one of the things that I really reacted on, was that fact that you can see that there was a very genuine frustration throughout all of the videos. That was something that I related to a lot too. Well, I do believe there are some stigmas, and I do believe there is a certain perspective that people think about females in the industry. Um, and I choose to believe that no matter if you're female or male, if you work hard and if you're good at what you do and if you trust the work that you do, then you will prevail at a certain time. Do I feel sometimes that it's a little bit of a longer road for girls than guys? Yes, because sometimes it's hard to be taken seriously, and I think that's what's really tough, is the fact that it's hard to be taken seriously as a producer, or I can be in a situation where sometimes I'm in a room and maybe my feedback isn't as acknowledged as a male producer that's sitting next to me, even though I, for example, produced the song. So it can be difficult to be taken seriously, but I think that that's changing, and that's what's really really beautiful. That is changing. We have so many amazing females out there that are doing so many things and that are being respected for what they do. Um, so I would say there is a stigma, and there is, like, you always have to, when there's these stereotypes and there's these you always have to push through. So I choose to push through and work hard and be proud of my product and just be real. And I think that's where, when push comes to shove, in the long run, your talent and your work will speak for itself, whether you're male or female. I think that what I've tried to do is to really reflect on who I want to be as a artist, as a producer, as a songwriter, and so on. What I I usually do this every year. I sit down and I write a set of goals of things that I want to achieve the next year. But because of the situations, a lot of those things have changed, and that's made me rethink a lot of, okay, instead of thinking 1 year ahead, I'm trying to think 5 years ahead. And I think that you have to widen your perspective a little bit, because something like this can happen again. So I'm also really thinking about how I can do what I do in a lot of different ways, because we all also have to survive. We also, so, and it also made me think about, as a songwriter, as a producer, how little money that we make if we're not doing gigs, and like how, and there's a lot of these things, and that's something that made me start thinking, okay, how can I capitalize on doing different things? And when I did this, why didn't I actually get money for doing that? You start really reflecting on how you're living your life. So I think as an artist, I've had a chance to really reflect on where I want to be and what I want to do to be successful. And that's been really, really fun because I have a amazing plan for the future. Well, I think that as I mentioned also that I think that because we've had so much time to really reflect, we've had a chance to reflect backwards, but also forward. I think that I've learned a lot about the mistakes that I've made, and personally also. Also, I think being in Brazil for so long and being away from my family, um, I realized that I wanted to be closer to my family. And I think that when you end in a situation like this pandemic, when a pandemic like this, you really start to realize who you care about and who you love. And I think that being far away, I was chasing my career completely, which I'm still doing. But I think that it made me really reflect on my family and my mother, for example. I'm very close with my mother and how hard it's been on her being far away. Um, so I've really tried to reflect on what kind of relationships that I want to have with my family, with and with my close friends, and um, that's something that has changed for me, I think, a lot. Because I've been focused so much on music that I've maybe forgot to reflect on how I actually feel about being constantly on the road, or being far away from people that I really care about. So it's messed with me a little bit. I think this situation, I think it's messed with everybody. So for me to have that time to kind of figure out, okay, this is what I want to do with my work, but where do I want to be as a person? How do I want to be supportive? How do I want to be, stronger? Do I want to be a parent? Do I want to, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things that you really think about in life when you just stand still for a minute and reflect on where you are.